Thanks for tuning into the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone. Daryl Devonshire, also known as Coach D. Welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. Well, we have an amazing episode for you guys today. We're in the presence, and I'm honored to say we're here with Gene Smith, the athletic director of Ohio State. And today we're going to be talking about leadership. And Gene, thank you for coming on the show. I'm also here with Matt. He'll be also helping me host here. So today, Gene, I just want to start off, you have a laundry list of all the things you've accomplished and done. Can you just give us your backstory real quick? Who you are, why you're at the front of the room, some of your experience, just so we can let the audience know who you are and all the things, some of the great things that we want to highlight today, where you're at.
Well, thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Matt, for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to share some things with you. And, I've been blessed. I was fortunate to have a good father and mother and end up in college playing football, getting a degree, and worked in the coaching ranks at the football level, then worked in the private sector for a while at selling computers for IBM in the early 80s. But then I was really lucky because the position coach that I played for at Notre Dame had become the athletic director at a university called Eastern Michigan University. And he recruited me to come work for him. And he didn't have business skills, and my degree was in business, and I worked in the private sector. And so I brought that to Eastern Michigan, worked for him for a couple of years. He retired, and I was ultimately promoted to become athletic director there. And so I was at Eastern Michigan for 10 years, and then I went to Iowa State University as athletic director for 7. And then I went to Arizona State University for 5 years as athletic director, and just started my 16th year at the Ohio State University. And so I've been fortunate to have some good connections, first and foremost, that position me well. But we're all the total sum of our experiences in life. And as I just articulated, I had multiple experiences at multiple places in different environments. And so that's just a quick thumbnail summary of the blessings that I've had.
Wow, man, you're modest. That's amazing. You've done some great work with Ohio State, a very successful university. Matt, tune in there.
Yo, hey, listen, I'm biased. This is one of the best leaders, servant leaders that I've ever had the privilege of coming across. And I don't just throw that out anywhere. I've seen how and learned and been able to learn and have the privilege of learning from how great leadership should be administered, listening, learning, etc. But I just want to say, I want to clarify something for a man who's very humble. Gene Smith, you are the only, to my knowledge, you are the only person who has won a national championship as a player, as a coach, and as an athletic director.
Yeah, that's true.
Am I correct in that?
That's true. You're right.
Okay, well, that says a lot. Well, that says a lot right there. There's not a lot of people.
So modest.
Nobody.
That experience.
Nobody can say that. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. Again, you didn't even mention that because it's probably so low on the list of things that you have accomplished. What we want to talk about is culture. And one of the things that I have observed with the Ohio State University is a unbelievable culture. Can you give us a little bit of insight on how you brought that culture, how that culture became to be?
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. It just doesn't happen overnight. Everything is about people. I don't care what you do. Relationships and people are the heart and soul of all that matters in any organization. So making sure that you have structurally and behaviorally an environment where people understand why they're there. And so I focus a lot on, probably too much on communication. When I came to Ohio State, for example, first thing I did was spend time looking into personnel jackets of all the people that I was getting ready to work with. And I realized that none of them had goals and objectives, didn't have evaluations. Some of them had been there for years, and the only thing in the jacket was their resume. So what I began to do was basically go through a process to set up a mechanism for supervisors to learn how to set up quantifiable goals and objectives, and then ultimately evaluate people. And in that process, because people want to know what they're held accountable for, the most important thing was the conversation between the supervisor and the employee. Trying to understand with that employee what she or he wanted to accomplish personally and professionally. What are their goals? To create an environment where first and foremost, people understand that you care about them. And that's what people want to know. I mean, that people want to know that leadership ultimately cares about them. And so just summarizing that, we set up a system where we have clarity on where all of our employees ultimately want to be, professionally and personally. And we talk about that. We have sessions on how do we ultimately get someone that's an entry level in an entry level position in ticket management to ultimately be a director somewhere else. And that may mean they leave us, but that's okay. So anyway, it's a lot in that in the middle of that, but it's a focus on that. Now, the other part of that is when you have the opportunity to recruit people, first and foremost, you focus on values and character. I will, it's amazing when I interview coaches, they're shocked many times. I'll ask them what's their top 4 values in life, because I want to make sure they align with mine, or at least our organizations. And sometimes I'll give them a pass and say, okay, well, give me your 5th, because they might not hit one in their 4th. But at the end of the day, it's about people and setting up an environment where your behavior ultimately begets your culture, and that starts with caring about the people.
Okay, awesome. And so culture is the most vision, mission, values, goals, and objectives. That really is culture. We've talked about it at nausea. It's a foundation of everyone's success. If you don't have, you're building on a house. To the people that say, oh, come on, that's airy fairy or that's kumbaya stuff. What is your response? I mean, besides showing them the obvious results, how do you deal with getting people that might be fighting that system or might not give it the credibility it deserves on onboarding them?
Yeah, it's education. It's if they haven't experienced it, and many of those people who are fighting that, who are resistant to that, they just haven't experienced it. And so to your point, one, you got to show them results, but also you have to embed them in the process. You got to expose it to them. It has to be authentic and real for them. Otherwise, they're just going to see it as plastic or, just cellophane. You got to make sure that they touch it and feel it. So a lot of times when people come into our organization, or actually I'll share at the beginning when I started setting up the process and about goals and objectives and educating our 32 supervisors at that time, we went on a 2.5-day retreat to educate them, brought in human resources. Everybody was resistant. Everybody was apprehensive. But after the first year of implementation, everybody bought in. It was like, oh, this is unbelievable. They learned things about people that they didn't know, who they've worked with for so long. So you have to embed the people, bring them in, be respectful of that opinion, understand that that's their right to have that difference of opinion, but you bring them in, and when they're inside, they get it. 99.9% of the time, they get it.
And if they don't, then they're just in the wrong environment.
In the wrong environment, and that's okay. There's leadership. I subscribe to the philosophy that there's not one leadership style. There's multiple leadership styles you use in the business situation fluently. You just do it. And there's times when to your earlier point, you have to be authoritative. Say, this is the vision. This is where we're going. And then there's times you have to be a coach. And if someone doesn't buy in, you might have to coach them out. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. They just don't fit your culture. They may be better off in a technology environment where they don't have to worry about other people. So at the end of the day, you just have to make sure you have a process where you're respectful of that.
So situational leadership, okay? So we get that, perfect, that's well documented. I want to bring us back to something that you said at the beginning of the conversation. because I really want to hang on to this, and I wrote it down when you said it. So you had parents who obviously instilled some good values in you. You had coaches who obviously elevated you from where you were to the next level. But I want to talk about your business experience and your degree in business, because that's one of the gaps that I see in the sports system, that we see in the sports system all the time, is we see people, sports is business, whether it's youth sports, whether it's college sports, whether it's professional sports, sports is business. And in the youth sports sector, we often come across people that aren't skilled at business, trying to run a business. And it seems like in the youth sports sector, we give the keys to the person with the strongest heartbeat or the person that raises their hand first. So I want to talk about how much of your business degree and your business experience at IBM, how much did that shape your then coming into the sports sector, and how much did you take from that knowledge and apply to the sport world?
Oh my goodness, great question, Matt. And as I shared earlier, we're the total sum of all of our experiences in life. And I brought with me from my degree in business administration, the courses, the education from the courses that I valued. I had a group dynamics class that was just phenomenal. I had a strategy and policy class that was off the chain. Weirdly, I liked accounting. I was one of those weird guys that for some reason I liked accounting 1 and 2. And so a lot of those things in the principles of management, what a great course that was. I actually still have those books. So those things that I learned in the classroom, I was fortunate to be able to practically apply them in my sport as an athlete. I mean, group dynamics was my football team. Mm-hmm. It was easy. The principles of management, I did that with my football team. I was never a captain, but I was that guy that was the locker room guy. So all that transferred into my experience that I was going through at that particular time. And then, of course, when I worked at IBM, their training program was equivalent to getting your MBA in 1981. And so I sold to the manufacturing distribution industry, and I learned those businesses quickly. And so all those things are so applicable to sports. I don't care if you're running a youth league or if you're running a program like mine or you're running a professional league, you need business skills. You need to understand the principles of management. They're simple. You need to understand personnel management. You need to understand budget. You need to understand how to manage people. And so there's so many things in the business space. The accounting, I use that almost every day because you're dealing with funding, and at every level you have that. Organizational skills. I don't care what level you're at. If you're running a youth team, you better be organized. You better be organized, and you better be clear in your communication, and particularly with the youth league. And so to me, there's so many things from the business perspective and the business acumen that I use almost all the time. I can't understate its value.
Yeah, I love it. And I know I'm dominating the conversation, and Daryl wants to make a point, but I've got two more questions before I zip it. Right. Were you surprised when you got to Ohio State that some of these things weren't in place? Number one. Are you surprised that we haven't done society a better job at the lower entry levels of sport at implementing, adopting, and creating some of these same systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ohio State, I was surprised at a lot of different things. Frankly, our budget management had some flawed planning principles in it, and operational guidelines that we managed over the years. But it's a typical organization that has an unbelievable brand. The brand, the history and tradition allows you to operate and be successful until you pull back the cover, until you start peeling back the onion. And then you realize that you have this opportunity to go from good to excellence, to go from excellence to preeminent. And so when you begin to implement the things that should be in place, that allows you to get on that trajectory that everyone else aspires to be on. So I was surprised to see it at Ohio State. Then, relative to youth sports, I don't care what country it is. I mean, I'll use the United States where I am. It's so flawed. It's disheartening. What has happened over the years is cottage industries have emerged based upon individuals wanting to do something in that space. There's no true governing body. There's no accountability. There's none of that. And so you have some entrepreneurs who think they're entrepreneurs who entered the space and they're taking advantage of people in the wrong way. And it's just so sad. But there needs to be oversight with some authority, but we just don't have it. And I am, I'm surprised that our society hasn't embraced it more. Some of that falls within our educational system, our K through 12 system, and the fact that years ago we eliminated the people who had the ability to assert control. We eliminated a lot of sport programs, a lot of extracurricular programs where coaches were teachers, and those coaches walked the hallways. They knew those kids. They knew those parents. And we in the late 70s, when budgets became challenging in the United States, we eliminated a lot of those things. And that took the teacher coach out of it, and it brought in that third party. The guy that's working at the Standard Oil gas station is now coaching, flag football.
It speaks to your point about the relationships and people versus what it now is a transaction.
No question. It's all a transaction. I remember at Arizona State, it was we had an incubator for businesses, and it was a great plan. The students brought to us this plan to develop a youth program where they would charge parents to have their daughters and sons go through this youth programs with the ultimate goal of helping those student athletes get scholarships at colleges. And I'm sitting there looking at these guys, and I started to interview them, and none of them would ever play sports, not one. And it was just, they had a business plan, the business plan to make money, and it had nothing to do with what you learned from sport. And it was disheartening, and so that has evolved in our society.
I got one quick question here. I got a couple questions. But when you came to Ohio State, you must have had a lot of pushback, because this is not the norm. This what you did is not the norm. Like, can you go over what were people fighting you on? Because, and this is what I think a lot of people who want to make changes, when they go into an organization, they got all these great ideas, but you got all these people trying to roadblock you, put up obstacles, and you're trying to give everyone a vision, a plan. So what were your biggest challenges, Gene, when you arrived at Ohio State and you wanted to implement this stuff?
Good question, Daryl. When I went there, I shared with you earlier, one of the first things I did was spend time looking through everyone's personnel jacket, which is like 289. So I literally spent hours going through those jackets. There's a great book by a gentleman by the name of Michael Watkins. It's called The First 90 Days. And it's an easy read, a quick read, short book, but it talks about leadership transition and the importance of listening, asking questions, and being patient. Because there are a number of ideas that I had early on based upon seeing things, but I didn't make a lot of decisions early, because I didn't understand if I made this decision here right now, I didn't know what the domino effect was way over there, because I hadn't been there long enough to learn that. And so the most important thing in a transitional leadership situation is that you learn. You learn the culture, you learn the people. So I was able in that first 90 to 100 days, take my time and ascertain who are the people that I could get on the bus.
Right.
Who are the people that I may ultimately have to transition off the bus. It's the Jim Collins theory.
Right.
And so I went through that first, few months just questioning, being stupid, and just making sure I understood who my players were. And so in the first year, I transitioned out quite a few people.
Right.
And you know, you don't have, in a transition leadership situation, you don't have a lot of time, a lot of opportunity to make the personnel changes that you know you need to make. And so if you end up keeping someone because of emotions, maybe that may become a parasite in the organization and the culture you're trying to create. So you have to make hard personnel decisions early, but that's after you spent time understanding who should be on the bus and who should be off. And so, yes, I faced resistance early, but I call it facilitating transitions. I facilitated transitions.
Right. So this, and that leads me to my next one. You haven't once talked about winning, and when you were bringing in coaches and for all your teams, what was the process? Because I know coaches, you know, they show up and they're like, I got a winning record, and that's what they hang their hat on. What was your criteria for bringing in some of these coaches, and like, how did they have to fit into your process or your vision?
Well, you know, they have to share our values. You know, the coaching staff that I work with now are just phenomenal. Because I wanted to get to a point where at Ohio State, we weren't recruiting, we were selecting. And we needed to get our program to a point where a talented and gifted coach understood that. And when you get to selecting, you can separate character and talent. And so I could go through every single program. Now, I remember when I first came here, we couldn't beat Stanford in recruiting. We couldn't literally sit in the living room and share a program with a culture, with environment, with the academics that could compete against Stanford. And I wanted to beat Stanford in so many different ways. And obviously competitively, we were already there, but that wasn't it. I wanted to be able to sit down with that bioengineering All-American high school player who looked at Stanford one way and looked at Ohio State another way. And we ultimately created that. So I look for values, I look for character, and all of our coaches are focused on that 100%.
Do they report back to you? Like, I know coaches, they got their game plan and they like, I do what I do. Don't worry, I'll get you your result. But did you have say, like, in helping them guide in the culture and in their teams? You have say in that?
Oh, no question. You know, I have a team of sport administrators, and we work with our coaches, and all the coaches, their plan for how they run their program is approved by us. You know, their team rules, you know, their practice, not their practice plans, but their practice calendars and how they deal with their student athletes. We have so many things, Daryl, that our coaches are responsible for beyond just coaching. You know, at our level, if you recruit character and the talent, you know, you're going to get the type A student athlete that is accountable and they want to respond. They want to go to the next level. So we just got to make sure we have all the tools in place and the environment in place for them to chase that dream. And so the head coaches, they get it. I mean, I have, head coaches meetings, and in this situation we're in today with COVID-19, I have head coaches call every week, all head coaches. But we've created an environment where our coaches work together and they share best practices, experiences. And so I know those things are happening. If a coach has an issue with a student athlete, they may not necessarily come to administrators. They'll go to another coach, you know, and say, hey, how would you deal with this situation? And so I have all this intellectual talent and skill that is shared.
Yeah.
And so it's not just me, it's my team. And so that's what you have to create in your culture, where everybody says, you know, we can work together to make sure wrestling is good, tennis is good, volleyball is good, football is good, basketball is good. It's a collaborative of bringing all that intellectual property together to be the best that you can be.
So I want to, that's such a great point, because we talk about the tenets of quality sport management, and organizational alignment is the number one tenet. And that organizational alignment isn't just, vertically up and down your sport. It's horizontally across all sports.
Right.
And it seems like you've done that. And we're stealing the word preeminent, because it's like silver, platinum, gold, and then all of a sudden preeminent just comes out of nowhere. So we're taking that and we'll aspire to use that somewhere. That's good. You brought a point up about recruiting and the recruiting of character. And it's one of the things that I've observed and noted from just watching how you operate. And Daryl, and you have already talked about it in the coaching staff: hire great people, get out of their way, give them the tools, give them the support, get out of their way. Same with the athletes. So let's go to the athletes in terms of the types of young men and women the Ohio State University is looking for. Can you describe those people to us?
Yeah, it's an interesting profile. So first and foremost, they have to have athletic talent. I mean, it's of course, they have to be top of the pyramid athletically. But then we're looking for young people who understand that they're not just coming here to participate in soccer or gymnastics and be champions in their sport. They want to be championship people. So years ago, I developed my philosophy around total student athlete development. And so looking at student athletes who understand that academics is number one. It's number one. And I can go back through all my experiences of times I've called a coach and said, hey, look, that kid's not playing, or that kid's coming out of the practice. Get him off the practice field. Because I'm your worst nightmare with missing classes. You can't miss class. I mean, you can walk to class comatose and go to class and be comatose. So I had a system early on where we tracked kids to make sure that they were in class. And if they weren't, you don't practice. So we're looking for kids who understand their personal accountability. Athleticism, academics, highest priority. Then how do we help develop them as people? We're looking for kids who will be able to transition to our environment and give of themselves to us, to allow us to help them grow. And our coaches, they do a great job of interviewing kids. And there's some kids that, we have to go to our academic faculty council to get admitted. And so I'll interview the coach. I'll talk to them. Okay, tell me about this kid. Their GPA might not be just right. Their ACT score might not be just right. But tell me, what is it about them that you feel will help them matriculate here? So we start talking about the person. I want people who understand that when you come into our program, and the profile of that is the person with character who understands, is going to embrace that we're going to help you develop as a woman and as a man, and then ultimately find a job. And so it's not like this defined, set of a profile. Is some of us are art, but of course there's pieces of it that's science. But we're looking for people that want to fit into our world.
Which would you say isn't the norm? And correct me if I'm wrong, the norm seems to be the focus on the hardware. Who can run the fastest, jump the highest, who's the best athlete, who's got the most athletic, tactical, physical competence.
Yeah, whatever it takes, get him or her into our school.
No, we don't do that. So I'll never forget. So Urban Meyer, our previous football coach, we had a recruit in, and he is a freak of an athlete. And Urban had concerns, and he's always had me do this, Ryan. A lot of my coaches have me do this when they have concerns. And this kid is like off the chain, and he's at another school. We play against him, and he's really freaking good. Makes me second guess myself on occasion. But he asked me to sit with him and his parents, and I never forget. After 5 minutes, even not that long, I was done. I spent 20, 25 minutes with him out of courtesy. And I walked out of that room, and Urban was down at the end of the hall talking to some other people, and he lifted his head and looked at me, and I just, said, we're not taking that kid. And the kid was an athletic freak of nature. But I could see in him, he had no interest in the things that we're interested in. He had no real interest in academics, and he had an edge to him from a character point of view that we don't need to take. We don't need to. And soon as you sacrifice that and just say you're going to recruit talent, that becomes a locker room issue. And I just don't believe in that. And there's a lot of places that I can go and work at where I can get by with that, but that's not what I'm all about. So to me, to your point, Matt, the whole thing is about making sure that that athlete understands that in order to be the best that you can be, you got to buy into what we're all about. And that's why we've been blessed to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, we've been blessed to be successful. You say that, but it's not by accident.
No,
And all of these systems and processes and all the things that you've just spent the last 30 minutes describing really contribute to that. And I think that's the most important message for parents and for young people to take away. And you said two big words: personal accountability. And those words seem to be very fleeting in today's society, where we can point the fingers, blame everywhere else. I mean, we won't even get into the leadership that's plaguing our countries right now. But personal accountability, and another thing you talked about was the parents. So can you tell us a little bit about, for all the parents listening and all the young men and women listening, personal accountability? How important are the parents in creating, developing, elevating that in their own culture at home? How do you find that? How do you see that? How as coaches do you delineate that?
Yeah, it's critical. So we, every coach in every program has to have a parent management plan. And every sport has a different culture. I remember, Urban, when I first hired him, and he created this parents association. He wanted to structure it. They have a president, vice president, the whole 9 yards. So it's a structure. But I remember him standing in front of them, telling them, "Hey, look, we're going to help you figure out, where games are, which hotels to get in, and all that type of stuff. But never call me about play calling. Never call me about playing time." And I remember he pointed to one of the parents who's a carpenter in the room and said, "You're a carpenter. You're not a football coach. If you want to be a football coach, you go coach somewhere. I'm not a carpenter. So if I need some help with carpentry, I'll call you about carpentry." So you have to be honest with parents. You can't play them. And that's one of the things that I have. All of our coaches have a parent management plan to be honest, forthright. We help our parents understand that when those kids become 18, because sometimes we get some 17-year-olds, they're adults. The kids sign forms to tell us whether or not they want their grades or information sent to their parents or not. And we'll tell parents all the time, if you call us, and I've had this happen to me so many times in my life, a parent will call and say, "Hey, don't talk to me please don't let my daughter know that I'm calling you." And I stop them and I say, "Wait, before you say anything else, I want you to understand that whatever you tell me, I'm telling your daughter. She's 20. She's not a child." And so you have to be honest with parents, and in that process, when you're honest with the parents, it helps the kids develop that personal accountability, because you can tell the kid that, you know what, your parents are engaged, we communicate with them on the right way, but you're making your own decisions. And so it's about being honest. It's about being transparent. It's about having a plan on how you're going to effectively communicate. And many of our coaches have meetings with parents all the time and just tell them what's going on. But you got to be honest with them.
Is that something that you think you'd like to see at the lower levels of sport, so that they could be practiced and skilled at that before they get to you?
Oh my goodness. Oh, it would be so helpful. I mean, I like to see that as part of a structure all the way down to 14, 13 years old, where the parents understand what their role is. And we've all seen it. You see parents going ballistic on the sideline. You see
become their agents.
Yeah, it's sickening. But at the end of the day, a lot of times they haven't been put in their place relative to their role. And so youth coaches can do that. They can do that. So to me, I remember I was coaching a church league, back in South Bend, and there were 9, 10, 11-year-old kids, girls. And I played everybody on the bench. And I never forget, one of the parents was upset because, I wasn't playing the best players. And for me at that age, that wasn't about it. It wasn't about winning unless the team wanted to. There's certain teams we played against where the kids wanted to beat them. So they were like, okay, I'll give up my time. But, but I told the parents, I said, look, if somebody else wants to coach them, go ahead. I'm out. But if you don't tell them those things, they don't know. So they behave the way they behave. And so I would love to see a structure where there's not rules and regulations, but best practices and guidelines for parent engagement and how you handle parents all the way down to that probably 13, maybe even 12-year-old level.
And the software development, because there's no shortage of expertise in the hardware development. We can go online and Twitter and see how to make a kid run faster, jump higher, blah, blah, blah. Here's the newest, latest, and greatest way to develop. But where is that software development? Like you've talked about, and I want to pull the stuff that you talked about at the beginning of the conversation, because that's all the people skills, the relationship skills, the vision, the mission, the guiding principles, the terms of reference, all of those things that make businesses successful. We don't seem to take and utilize with our most important assets, which is our children. And we always say, Daryl and I always say, the formula for success need not be reinvented, it need be implemented. And that's one of the things that we are calling for at the entry levels of sport and at the grassroots levels of sport is, why are you waiting and developing these bad habits? Why are you perpetuating this nonsense? Why are you in a race to get to this scholarship for your young son or daughter? The software skills. If less than 2% will continue from college to professional, for 90%, this is a dress rehearsal for real life and preparation for real life.
That's exactly right. And so we I have a leadership institute, and our mission is to have our student athletes before they walk across the stage to get their degree, they know what they're going to do when they walk off the other side. So this past year was one of our best years ever. We're north of 90% of our graduates. They had already signed a professional contract. They were going to go to grad school. They'd already been admitted, or they had jobs. And so this was our largest number of student athletes who were admitted to grad school and were going to grad school. And so we've shifted the culture a little bit where they're all saying, I'm going to just go to grad school. Because it's helping them understand exactly what you're talking about, Matt. Through sport participation and competition, you learn things that the general student population doesn't learn. You learn how to work with people from all walks of life. You learn a level of discipline that most people never learn. You learn how to control your own emotions that when you're in high school, you didn't even know how to control. And there's a lot of soft skills that are developed through sport participation and competition, but you have to help them understand what they're learning. In my day, I didn't get it until I was out. What we're trying to do is teach them in the moment and teach them what pressure really is. And so if somebody interviews them and they ask them, can you handle the pressure? They can say, well, let me tell you about my sophomore year when I had to line up and kick a field goal when we were down by 2 with 3 seconds on the clock, and I had to make the field goal in order to win. Let me talk to you about pressure. And so all those things we try and teach them in the moment, and there's no reason that couldn't be done before they got to us. I've always felt that for high school participation, for youth participation, parents, everybody else should go through these educational modules online and you complete before your child has an opportunity to participate. And those tools don't exist. It's not there. It's not there. If you want your son or daughter to be a member of our team, as a parent, you have to go through these 1, 2, or 3 educational models online. You become certified athlete. You're going to come try out. These are the modules you need to go online and learn before you even come to our first tryout. And that's part of the process. That should be structurally embedded in our culture. But that's one of the things in the back of my head that I've always said, if I ever retire, I may chase that dream.
Wait, everyone heard that? Everybody just heard that. We're holding you to that.
Hey, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to see that. Listen, I got one more. As you're on the youth sports topic, do you think it's the parents that's the biggest challenge at that level, or is it the coaches?
Yeah. I don't know if you could, it depends on where you are and all those type of things. I don't know if you could pin it on one group that way. I think it's a collaborative.
Right.
You have some great coaches out there. I mean, there's some really great youth coaches who are trying to do it the right way, and they've figured out a strategy. So to me, it's a collective, and just making sure that you have a system and a way to bring those groups together. I've always, I still feel this, before you have a team meeting, you have a parent meeting. And before it happens and the coach lays out, this is going to happen. And the parents, since they've gone through those modules, they're able to get feedback. They're able to ask questions. And then before anything starts, you have clarity. And then you roll. And that, to me, doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. You just roll out the soccer balls and they show up, and then the parents show out and you go. That's not right.
On
And
that,
everyone's left.
you're saying the same thing. Then coaches need this education because
No question.
coaches know the tactical, but they don't have this education on what you're talking about, the culture and building confidence and communication. So the first thing you talked about today was communication, and I think we need to go back down and educate these coaches and parents on the communication piece.
Well, it's so critical.
In line with what you're saying.
That's right. That's so critical. I mean, if you can, the coaches, if you gave them an edict or a directive to say, okay, you're going to have a parent meeting before you have a student athlete meeting, they don't know what to say.
Exactly.
So you have to educate them on, okay, these are the things that you need to talk about relative to, the parents and then ultimately the kids. What's your philosophy of coaching? How are you going to coach? What's the goal? What's the end game? I mean, if it's to win every contest, that's one thing. If it's participatory in nature and you're trying to help them grow as people, all those type of things you need to articulate. And then at that point, parents have the opportunity to select in or select out. But as a volunteer coach, this is how I'm going to run it. Because a lot of times it's a volunteer coach. And even as a paid coach, you still have to do that. So to me, I just think that's missing in our society and probably all around the world.
So me and Matt have talked about this, but where the best coaches are at the top of the pyramid, and we got volunteers at the bottom, and most self-interested coaches. I'm a big believer in somehow we got to figure out a way to pay these guys or make them all go through some sort of course in order to teach these kids, because that's where we need the best coaching, the real best coaching at the grassroots levels.
Oh,
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, the hard part is the pay part, because it depends on where you are, what country you're in, or what geography you're in, and it's just hard. There's no financial structure to help kids on the east side of Cleveland learn how to play baseball and play in a baseball league. It's just the money's just not there. But there's enough people who, from a volunteer point of view, who can be good coaches. We just have to create a way to give them the tools, to give them the ability to learn how to be effective communicators. There's so many passionate volunteer coaches out there, but no one's ever taught them. They're just giving up their time. And so how do we embrace them? Certainly, there's certain levels that you can create out some pay scales and, certain sports, things of that nature. You can figure that out, how to do that, pay someone hourly. But I think for everyone, you still ought to have a mechanism to educate, give them the tools so they can have a parent management plan, so they can develop their mission statement, their purpose, and effectively communicate how things are going to happen. Having a conversation about, hey, if your daughter gets hurt, how's that work? It falls on your insurance. You got a management. We got EMS over there. People just show up and there's no conversation about that. I've seen that so many times. And so to me, I think it's just unfortunate that we don't have a governing youth body. We have some fragmented ones in the United States, is AAU and they're okay sometimes, not always the best. But there's not enough. It really isn't. It's true grassroots.
Love
Yeah,
it.
totally.
Man,
Okay, listen, this has been amazing. We could talk for hours, but we've already taken up more of your time than we asked for. Gene Smith, the athletic director for the Ohio State University. We always end up, Daryl and I always end off, Gene, with first steps. So if you're a listener, if you're an athlete, if you're a parent, based on, or a coach or an organization, it can be any one of those. So we give you lots of latitude because we put you on the spot. First steps, in being a better athlete, in being a better sport parent, in being a better sport organization. What can our listeners take from your experience in first steps?
I think it's just important, first and foremost, to be curious. Everything that we're talking about right now is about, okay, I'm listening and I'm learning. So be curious and ask questions. And based upon what you hear and what you learn, decide, okay, I'm going to go do this and not these. Do this. So many people, when they're trying to affect change, try and do too much, and they're not effective in having really any impact. So to me, bite off a little bit, and then you start to expand your chew. So to me, just be curious, and hopefully everyone has a passion and they're willing to dip their toe into this a little bit to fix something. And hopefully, if you fix that something, then you'll fix something next after that.
I feel like you're talking directly to me when you say that.
Oh, you guys good?
Thanks so much for Gene. This was fantastic. Daryl, any parting comments?
Yeah, listen, Gene, thank you so much, man, for being on the episode today. I learned so much. I knew a lot of this stuff, but the way you frame it, it's tight. And what the courage you had to go in to the Ohio State University and tell them there's a better way. That I'm more impressed with you after this.
Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Hey guys, if you like this episode, you got to share this. Share this with everybody, guys. And I think this is going to be a really popular episode. Share it. Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast. And on that note, just go play, guys. Thanks.